computer. Welcome everyone, and welcome back to today's love class. And it's pretty exciting today because we've got the gorgeous Stellar Muse joining us. That's Elise Carr, and she's going to share some of her beautiful wisdom about creating love abundance in our life and in our relationships. Welcome, Elise.
Thanks, Peter, for having me. It's a joy to be here, and I'm seriously excited about what we're going to dive into today.
It's something that's really close to my heart, and I know that you've done some beautiful work in the world helping young women really sort of up-level their life and experience a sense of abundance in love and spirit and relationships beyond what they were currently experiencing. What do you see as being one of the biggest challenges that young women face in this area of really feeling a sense of love?
It's such a powerful question, and probably something that we don't ask ourselves enough. And I'd honestly say one of the biggest issues that I see with women, probably of all ages, but especially those who are about to maybe start that big relationship, is a sense of self sometimes being missing. We don't really know who we are, and we get caught up with, I'm a Libra, I need those shoes, I'm a doctor, whatever it is, all these labels, but we don't really know who we are beyond the physical, beyond our emotions, beyond the mind. And let's say beyond that is your higher self, your true self, your soul. That's the point that I want you to have a relationship with. I want that connection, I suppose, for women to see and understand and feel. And that's what I feel is definitely missing, probably beyond most things, and what would impact most things. Because if we had that relationship, if we had that connection, it would kind of filter into our thoughts, it would filter into our emotions and our feelings, and it would filter into ourselves physically. Literally how we look as well as how we feel within the body. So it's pretty powerful.
Yes, let's dive into this in a lot more detail. So we're going about our everyday life where we've got our careers, we've got our family, we've got our friends, we've got our social life. How would we know if we're really lacking that connection? What would be some of the questions we would ask? How would that sort of show up for us if we weren't truly connected in?
Starting from how would we know, I suppose, one extreme would be you'd start to be asking some big questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? Is there any purpose to my life? Do I really like my career? Am I with the right person, or do I need some time alone? Some of those big questions might come up at one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, if you're really quite detached or maybe just not that far along the path yet, and that's totally cool because we're all at different stages, you might be kind of stuck in what we call the personality. In psychology, this sometimes is referred to as the ego. And that personality stage, like I touched on before, is like stuck into the desires. It might be the sex desire. You just want to have a connection with someone. It could be really primal. It might be the stuff desire. I need to accumulate more money to buy more things, to impress more people. That's the other end of the spectrum. So if you're feeling connected to materialism, to needing to prove yourself, one side, or the other side, not knowing who you are or your purpose or why you're here, all of that entire spectrum, wherever you are along it, is kind of the beginning of needing something greater. And that next stage is kind of going from personality, or ego as we call it, and the physical, tangible world, to going into emotions and starting to understand your patterns and those erratic kind of cycles you go into, the crazy wild version of yourself or the really withdrawn version of yourself that can even be really sad sometimes or snappy, and starting to see those patterns. So we want to see your personality patterns, your emotional patterns, and then your thought patterns. That kind of negative self-talk, that stuff we beat ourselves up with, the judgment, the criticism of self and others. When we start to see and be able to read our own patterns, we know we're kind of making some kind of headway. We're starting to understand ourselves better, and kind of work through those bits is what we need to do to get to our truth, which, as I said, is kind of your higher self, the soul.
So if we are a little bit stuck in that personality, stuck in that ego, but starting to ask some questions or feeling a little bit disillusioned, how exactly is that linked into or preventing us from really experiencing love abundance, or perhaps co-creating beautiful relationships, or experiencing the sense of connection that we might experience? How are those two tied in together?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, Peter. The biggest connection, I suppose, is love. Love is the binding force of the universe. Call it energy or light, but I like the word love. I think you do too. So What binds us is love, but what separates us is living in personality nature. Because living in personality nature is selfish, it's self-focused, as opposed to selfless. Pure love, whether it's romantic or platonic, whether it's with a friend, it's actually selfless. It is giving, it is serving. So in order for us to benefit from this process and be able to have a deeper connection of love in general in our life, because love is love, we still want to feel it in all different ways, we need to shift from being obsessed or so deeply ingrained in this personality material phase and start to look at ourselves as being kind of like channels or vessels or vehicles of service. So how can I show up today and be more loving? How can I show up today and be less attached to making money purely to buy that bag and instead serve this person who's in front of me who perhaps needs to feel love? And we learn to kind of come from a place of love, to come from essentially our heart. Because our heart's like the seat of the soul. It's this amazing dynamic place. And for the record, women actually ideally want to give and receive love from this place, not from the genitals. They want to come from the heart space. So it's actually innate, it's organic within us. So once we start to feel that a little bit more and soften into it, it will begin to flow with more ease. So it's kind of a shift in perspective as well as a shift in attitude and actions.
So for anyone that's listening that feels as though perhaps they've even had an experience before, they've been in a relationship and they've given and given and given and loved someone to what they feel is the depths that they can possibly love someone, and it's turned really unhealthy or dysfunctional, or it hasn't worked out and it's left them, you know, jaded, hurt, burnt, disillusioned about creating love again. Can you maybe give us some insight into what is the difference, or, you know, is that the love that you're talking about, or what, you know, why is it when sometimes we do feel like we are of service and we are really giving, it isn't always conducive to healthy relationships?
So true. And I'm so pleased you mentioned this. This is like that fine line between devotional kind of giving at the detriment of your own well-being compared to selfless service for the benefit of everyone. And that fine line is sometimes called boundaries, self-boundaries, discernment, and also using your heart in alignment with your mind, right? Which means love and wisdom. When we talk about love esoterically in the psychological field that I work in, we kind of don't separate love and wisdom. They're kind of synonymous because you can't really feel with the heart unless you also think with the mind. So while you're being really devotional and lavishing all this love on this beloved, if nothing's happening, if the relationship's even toxic or it's abusive or in whatever way it might not be kind of reciprocal, you've got to ask yourself, is this really serving us? Because in a relationship, it's you and me and we, right? So yes, we can be selfless in our service, but sometimes we have to realize that perhaps we've reached a point where this person's not on the same path as me, where I've given all I can give and nothing's shifting, nothing's changing. They might not be ready for where I'm going. Sometimes we go together, sometimes we go apart. So using your discernment, which is the wisdom of your mind, in alignment with that selfless heart is absolutely necessary. Right? So we can't forget that while we're loving all the time, we have to keep the mind in alignment. Sometimes in this beautiful spiritual new agey world, we think it's all about the love and the heart. Yeah, it's all about the love, but don't forget your mind. So ask yourself those big questions again and make sure you're being true to you. And this kind of comes back to not only being discerning, but also using your integrity. And that's super important when we learn boundaries.
Can you give us some tips from a practical sense about how we can really get into alignment and know how to clearly, I guess, recognize our boundaries, to be able to discern clearly? Because I know that a lot of women, they kind of second guess themselves as well. They're not really, you know, we want to be able to stand up for ourselves. We want to be able to communicate what our needs and wants are and have boundaries in relationships, but we're also not really sure how to go about doing that. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
For sure. The most important thing to know thyself, to know all of you, physically, emotionally, mentally, and your soul, that highest version of you, is to create time and space to be able to investigate, to be able to explore this. So to me, it's a non-negotiable, essential component of leading a, you know, a spiritual and loving life, that you have a non-negotiable time just for you. You carve this into your day. For me, it's part of my morning practice. And I set that time aside and I do an alignment, which we're going to talk about later. And I will sit there and do the alignment and then a meditation practice and then I'll study. And all of that is non-negotiable time that helps me better understand myself. And when I understand myself better, I'm clearer and I can make wiser choices. And this is what it comes down to, us making wise choices from heart. So in order to get to that place, we have to give ourselves time. So don't overestimate how powerful it is to put your phone away, to not be on social media, to not be running around doing, but instead be, even if it's just for 5 minutes, maybe it's just 2 minutes. Obviously 5 would be better, but whatever you can find and understand how powerful that is and how important it is for you to better understand yourself and therefore be a more powerful, more in line version of you who can come from truth, who can serve from that selfless place with wisdom and love.
Are there any other symptoms that you see people sort of suffering from, or ways in which it impacts their life or their relationships or their ability to connect, that you see would also really benefit those people in terms of coming back into alignment with that and obviously undertaking the beautiful alignment practice that we're going to be sharing?
Yeah. If you realize that time slips away from you because you're on social media too much, because you spend your spare time watching, let's say, binge watching Netflix, shopping, drinking, partying, having promiscuous sex, all these kind of things. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a place for everything, but if that is a big part of your life, it's not really connected to your heart. It's not really connected to a conscious part of your mind. It's not connected to your purpose in life. You could be wasting some of your precious time that could be actually better invested instead of the material world in more of a spiritual world. And that spiritual world being your connection to spirit, your connection essentially to your purpose, to knowing yourself, to being in alignment with your truth and living from that place and loving from that place. So I'd be aware of how I spend my time. What are my patterns and what are my cycles? What are my default settings? What do I always do when someone says something that hurts my feelings? Do I react? Do I defend myself? Start to understand how you work. Start to be really observant with how you show up every day, how you start your day. What are the thoughts that go through your mind? What are the feelings that keep occurring over and over and over again? Because these are all signs. This is part of you knowing yourself. The better you know yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, the better you're going to be able to make the changes, even little changes here and there, day by day, because this is big work, right? It's a work of a lifetime, really, let's be real. No one's going to wake up and be perfect. So understanding bit by bit, process by process, this awareness will start to cultivate what we call more consciousness, a higher vibration, where you'll be able to live from, love from, and ideally make those wise choices from.
Beautiful. And when we do make some inroads, and like you said, it is a lifelong journey, but when we do make inroads into finding that higher vibration or experiencing that level of consciousness or being more in alignment with who we are and the kind of love that we want to co-create, how have you seen, or what's been your experience of how that impacts your intimate relationships? Like, how do they really benefit from the work that we do on ourselves?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so beautiful in a sense. And that's kind of a throwaway word, but actually it is beauty in that organic sense, beyond the external. It's the beauty of the heart. In couples, and I've seen this because I work with couples, you see a deeper compassion, tolerance, understanding, patience, which also sounds so whatever, but let's really think about this. What happens if normally you have an argument, you both blow up, shoes go flying, something gets smashed, someone storms off? What happens if that didn't happen anymore? And I'm not talking about suppression of emotions. I'm talking about, what about two adults who can kind of authentically and calmly and lovingly communicate what's going on, sort it out, and come together? So at nighttime, someone's not sleeping in the spare room, or, you know, someone doesn't roll over and ignore the other one, but maybe there's actually a hug and a bit of intimacy. Maybe you actually are really wanting to make love and reconnect physically because you've resolved something so big. Being able to step up and show up in a different capacity, and essentially all this comes from you being more wise and loving. And like I said a while ago, you know, how can I show up and be more loving today? You can ask that with your beloved. You can ask that of anyone, especially someone who drives you bananas and drives you up the wall and you'd rather not speak to them. Maybe that's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a coworker. we can apply this to every relationship. And that's why it's so powerful and quite life-changing if we commit to doing the work and being patient with ourselves along the way too.
Absolutely. And I think I can probably speak for most of the viewers as well. We really are in that transitional generation where we are looking for something that is more conscious, more connected, more supportive perhaps than what our parents or previous generations of relationships are. And we're really lacking in models for that. And I hear a lot of young women say, you know, the amount of conscious guys I meet, there's so few of them. How am I ever going to have this amazing relationship? And I really love that you've kind of enlightened us to the fact that it does really start with us. How have you seen just one person in that relationship being able to instigate a beautiful shift in a dynamic between partners?
Yeah, that's really powerful too. And you can see this, even if it's just one person, because you'll notice when someone erupts, the other person normally erupts too. But what happens if that person that erupts in front of you, it doesn't go any further? What happens if you can stand there and actually be the calm in the storm? And that's how I visualize it. And that's how I speak to couples and those who are about to step into a new relationship, or those who want to find someone who's conscious, is be the calm in the storm. If someone's having a moment and they need to vent, because that's where they are at the moment, then come from that loving place. Choose your words wisely. Don't add fuel to the fire. Be cautious and also loving, but you also need to get your point across. And sometimes that's helping them calm down. Sometimes it's helping them feel supported because what they're going through is really full on and painful. So if you can use discernment and patience and that wisdom with the heart in that moment, you'll be able to shift the dynamic. And when we're calm, it helps calm them down. We even see this with children having tantrums. If you can bend down and meet them where they are and talk with them lovingly and calmly from love, from the heart, there can be a shift. Not always. Sometimes they're so far off the Richter scale, they've got to let it go and exhaust themselves. Sometimes people are like that. But if we can hold that space, all the better. And ideally, if someone can hold that space for us, if we have a moment, makes things easier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And certain women that I speak to, certain girls that I've talked to that have felt like they've had a pattern of relationships where they haven't felt met by their partner, or they haven't felt valued by their partner. I think what you're sharing is really, really beautiful in terms of being able to find a way to be able to be that, balance out perhaps sometimes the dynamics and moods and the emotions in a relationship, but without feeling like a doormat, so to speak.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about this beautiful alignment process, this guided alignment that's had such an impact on the clients that you work with, and certainly in the topic that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, definitely. And even for my personal journey as well as professional journey, it's had an impact. So the important thing is understanding that we aren't our bodies, we aren't our emotions, we aren't our thoughts. That's not us. We're beyond that. We're something greater. We're souls having a human experience. So we want to come from that place, right? We don't want to come from our personality or our emotions or our crazy animal mind kind of hamsterable thoughts. So to get into alignment, we need to connect with what we really are. To get into alignment, we need to align our physical body with our emotional body, with our mental body to be able to reach that. So it's kind of like a calling in of your soul, if you want to look at it like this. And it's actually an esoteric practice. And esoteric is kind of like an intangible practice. Esotericism is a study of consciousness. It's a science of the soul. So it helps us connect to what we really are, that essence, that energy, that light, sometimes seen as a silver cord. So this practice will align us with that and anchor essentially that part of us into our mind, into our heart, and into the base of our spine. As we know, that's kind of like the lowest part of the chakra system, if you're aware of the chakras, which I'm sure you are. So we're anchoring this within ourselves, kind of giving it a point of, I guess, connection, so that we can come from that place and feel stronger like an oak tree, so that when the storm comes, we can stand there from a place of presence, from a place of serenity, but also a place of strength, right? And then from there, we can still serve. So we don't need to kind of shy away, and we don't need to be overtly giving without having boundaries. It helps us stand strong, but loving and wise at the same time. And that's why I feel it's one of the most essential tools to kind of start your day. And from there, you can add in whatever else you want to go with it. But it's a beautiful way to start, so that you start the day and live the day from your higher self.
Wonderful. And this is available by clicking the link below the video today. Can you tell us, Elise, how often you would recommend that we go through or we experience this guided alignment?
I'd suggest once a day. You don't have to do it more than that. And I'd suggest probably, if you can, first thing in the morning, once you've done whatever you need to do, whether it's have a drink of water or something like that. If you're going to sit and do a meditation, or before you get on the yoga mat, or before you run out the door, whatever it is you do, take a moment, and literally it will be a couple of minutes max. So it's super simple to integrate into your life. And I do suggest you don't do it laying down in bed when you're still half asleep. Make sure you are sitting upright, comfortable, whether that's in a chair or cross-legged, so that obviously the energy can travel through with much more ease.
Are there any other tools or supportive practices or little things that we might also incorporate into this, or that would complement it as well?
The other part of the spectrum is how we finish our day. And I like to call this an evening review. So like I touched on, we explore and start to learn our own patterns, our habits, those thoughts, kind of things that show us who we are. So at the end of your day, and you can do this laying down in bed at night, super chill if you want, but make sure you give yourself maybe at least 5 to 10 minutes with no distractions ideally. And go through your day, starting from what you did, like literally the last thing you did. It might be kiss your beloved, it might be brushing your teeth, and you trace your day back. And you kind of bring up conversations you had, how you reacted, things that hurt you, things that stayed with you. And we don't do this to dwell, because we don't need to do that. We do it to start seeing our patterns. We do it to start seeing, oh my gosh, 3 times this week, someone had this response to what I did and I reacted, instead of taking it on board as constructive criticism, as an example. So it's a beautiful way, a reflection of sorts, to kind of empower us to better understand our default patterns, those responses, reactions, and how we can shift them to kind of better come into alignment of how we want to be, how we want to show up in the world, how we want to serve, how we want to live, how we want to be with our clients, our lovers, our friends, our children. So that's another way we can kind of, I guess, bolster and support our spiritual journey by starting with the alignment and finishing with an evening review.
Thank you so much, Elise. That sounds gorgeous. And thank you for sharing with us. To me, it sort of feels like you've shared a process that almost helps us sort of turn on the tap to be able to channel an abundant source of love that helps us feel aligned, that helps us make beautiful decisions in our life and about love, and really kind of course correct sometimes if we get off path a little bit.
100%. I love how you said course correct, because that's what it is. We have to understand we're learning, we're growing, we're evolving. We're not going to get it perfect every time, but that's beautiful, because that's part of the way we actually evolve. That's part of the way we shift our consciousness, whether it's a spiritual path or however you want to term it. So you see this as a practice. I see this as a lifetime commitment. It's a daily commitment of showing up every day and doing your best, whatever that is, because some days it's going to be 60%, some days it's going to be 110%. So above all else, be compassionate and gentle and loving with yourself as you do. Turn on the tap and let yourself become a clearer channel for everything you're here to do, because you are here to do amazing things.
Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful wisdom and your beautiful soul with our audience on today's love class. And I'm so thrilled. Our last interview was really beautiful as well. And I would encourage everyone to jump down and grab your copy of the beautiful guided process, the alignment process that Elise has created just for you based on all of her years of beautiful experience. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
Only to take each day as it comes, because every day is different. Every day is going to present us with new challenges, and that's part of the journey. So be courageous. And I love the fact that courageous, that word, courage, comes from the French word cœur, which means heart. So as we learned today, that heart and mind alignment is going to help you be your most courageous, loving, and wise self.
Beautiful. Sending you all so much love today and every day. We'll tune in tomorrow for tomorrow's love class. Take care and bye for now.